I'm Julie. Before I start, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's organised this, because it's a really lovely event, such a great turnout, and thank you for all those little micro moments that mean that you guys can be here. I know that means colleagues covering you or travel plans or whatever it is. I'm just thinking about all the micro moments that have meant that I can be here. I can imagine if I times that by the number of people in the room, it's a lot. Sorry, Zoom, I'll try and stay put. My name's Julie. I like yellow. And as I've already established, and I'm here to talk to you about coaching. And I'm so pleased because Rob kind of teed me up, because he spoke about so many different elements that are already part of what I wanted to talk to you about, which are coaching conversations. He mentioned strengths-based stuff, which is something that I'd like to pick up on, people's values and goals, feedback, the power of active listening. All of these things won't be brand new terms to you, but I want to talk about coaching specifically and the impact it can have on your learning environments, but starting with teachers first in terms of the way that they interact with each other, the conversations they have with themselves, and then ultimately the conversations they have with the children in the classroom. The clicker. Okay, shall we just do it old school? This way? Okay. Or maybe it was because I hadn't clicked onto the thing. My session names are always the same. It doesn't matter almost what subject I'm talking about, and I'm sure it's the same for everybody who's presenting today, is that I hope that you learn something new. I hope you have a chance to discuss stuff with colleagues, new or old or existing, not old, existing, and you have something that you can implement straight away. And as well as that, I hope that I'm able to impart some of my excitement and enthusiasm around coaching, and for you to have a bit more of an understanding of the value of coaching, and also determine readiness. I'll talk about what I mean by that, but determining readiness. Just a question, and I'm not going to ask you to contribute this because it may be a very personal conversation to you. But the question is, what has been your most memorable / important / best conversation that you've had, and why? And you might have a conversation that comes to mind, a real standout, important one. For me, it's conversations I had with my grandparents. They were sort of essentially my parent figure. And so all of those conversations, lots of them, not all of them, lots of them were really powerful conversations, particularly the ones towards the end of their lives, where they were able to kind of talk to me about our relationship and kind of more reflective. And I think about why they were important, but I want you to think about the elements of those conversations, not necessarily the content. And I might ask you about those elements, not the content, because as I say, they might be very personal conversations to you. For me, the reason those conversations were so powerful or impactful was because there was a high level of intimacy. They knew me very well, which also translates into a high level of trust. And I know that Rob touched on that in terms of trust, and that's something that we can break down a lot. I was able to feel vulnerable with them because of that intimacy, because of that trust, and there was an openness to our dialogue. So maybe that's the same for you. You might have some additional sort of themes that made it a wonderful conversation. Maybe it was just hilariously funny because you were having it with your best friend, whatever it was, humor, lightness, whatever constitutes a good conversation for you, and why. I know some people like to know the nitty gritty. We all learn in different ways. I was listening to Rob saying about know your staff. Some people want to know, where are you going, Julie? I don't want to just have flannel. So I'm going to talk to you about what coaching is, what it isn't, how it can help you to be a better leader, teacher, person, I think, and also our method for embedding a coaching culture in your school. And also the so what, which is what's the impact? And if I have time, I'd love to talk to you about some of the work we've done with our schools, but also what your next steps might be if you were thinking about doing this. This really echoes what Rob said, so I'm so grateful. I hadn't seen his talk beforehand, but it kind of chimes really well. I always put this quote up. I think it's really important. This is me, by the way, sorry, and I'm wearing yellow. And it's too much. It's all too much. In the 21st century, people don't want to be managed, they expect to be coached. And I want you to think about that in lots of different ways. Yes, Rob was referencing that survey where we were talking about millennials and Gen Z. You'll notice the young teachers that are coming into your profession are seeking feedback. They're wanting it. For us as kind of boomers or early millennials, We might be thinking, "Oh, just get on with it. Just why are you constantly seeking reassurance from me?" They're not. They want feedback. They want to improve. They expect it. And this is important for several reasons. Number one, we all know what it feels like to be managed versus coached. What does it feel like? The second thing is, just to talk about our early career teachers for a minute, they have their choice of industries. They finish university, off they go. They can go and be anything that they want to be if they're well qualified and well educated, etc. If they enter other industries, they will be coached. They will. It is an expectation. Coaching is something that's happened in other industries for a long time, and it's kind of a surprise to me that given that our schools are full of relationships and conversations every single day, probably more than any other industry, save healthcare perhaps, that we don't adopt this approach already in a more formal and less informal, natural way. So if we're asking people to come into our industry, to become teachers, to work with our young people, to work with the next generation, we know it's going to be tough. We're asking a lot of them. We're asking them potentially to do long hours for less pay than their peers. We have to support them, because otherwise they'll go to other industries, or they'll stick with us for 2-3 years. They won't make the 5-year early career teacher mark, which means they're going to stick with us, that we have that growing experience within teaching. So they expect that. I was going to say there was a third reason, but I've totally forgotten what it was. So if I remember it, I'll come back to it. Yes, I'll come back to it. I've completely forgotten it, completely gone blank. I do love stats, mainly because you get to choose the ones that work for you. So I could put this one up here and say 30% of people didn't see any benefit in coaching at all, which would technically be true according to this stat. But I get to pick the ones and I get to present it the way I want to. So 7% of people who received coaching benefited from improved work performance, relationships, and more effective communication skills. There are lots of stats out there about coaching. As I say, typically because it's been in corporate, a lot of the stats are around their ROI, their return on investment, which is usually linked to billable hours, for example, if you're working in a law firm. That doesn't work, that metric doesn't work in education. So I've chosen one, thankfully, there are lots to do with kind of your own personal benefit from it. So I've chosen one that reflects that. And as I said, schools are relationship-based organisations. So if we can see an improvement in our relationships and our communication skills, that can only be a positive thing. When I finished my coach training, they did like I was going to say a whip round. They weren't raising money. They were doing like a surveying of our, what do we call that? Roundup? They were doing a roundup from everybody. What was your biggest takeaway that you're taking from it? And for me, I said, I hope that the quality of every conversation I have after this will be a better quality conversation. And that phrase stuck with me, which then creates the name of our program, which is called Every Conversation. Because the question that I ask people is, what would be the impact if the quality of every conversation you had, be it with a parent, with your peers, with children, was a better quality conversation, just marginally? Every single conversation you had was slightly better. What would be the overall impact or the overall effect? Okay, I'm going to talk to you about the fundamentals. It's not an overly complicated diagram. Don't worry, you'll be able to stick with it. If you like words, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you because you're just going to have to listen to me. So I'm going to talk to you about what coaching is and where it sits within a suite of services that you may be familiar with. So if we take coaching to be the middle bubble, like I said, stick with me. It's not going to be overly complicated. Down the bottom, you might have things like therapy or counselling, coaching, mentoring, and then advisory, so consultancy services. So if we go down this end for a minute, those of you who've either taken part in therapy or counselling will know that it is a therapeutic intervention, typically focused on present and past. You are trying to work through something, you're trying to push through something in your present life because of something that's happened in the past, typically. But it has real similarities with coaching. The similarities are that typically they're one-to-one conversations. They're confidential and trusted conversations. And it can feel quite therapeutic and cathartic to go through a process of coaching. The distinction, and I must make this very clearly, is that coaches are not as highly qualified as therapists and counsellors. So if you are in a coaching mode and you feel as though that person needs therapy, counselling, signposting towards that, then that is what you must do, because therapy and counselling deals with trauma typically, and that requires a much higher level of training. But coaching conversations can feel quite therapeutic in nature. So if I skip over coaching for a minute, so I come back to it, mentoring. Now, coaching and mentoring, the amount of times I've been asked to come and do something about, or could you do something about coaching and mentoring, lumped together, is slightly unhelpful, because there are really strong distinctions, and particularly in schools where we have to recognise there's sort of hierarchy of experience and hierarchy within the organisation. There are time and place for each one of these things. They can come from the same person, but there's a time and place to shift between the two things. So mentoring is where typically you have walked their path before, you have had experience of what they are, maybe their first time into a head of department role, for example, or they're a new teacher, or they're new to the school, or they're new to role, whatever. And they need someone who's going to be there to be able to help them, guide them, give them advice about how to support their next steps, etc. And that can feel very closely aligned to what happens in coaching, but the conversations are very distinct. I'm just going to skip to the last one, which is consultancy. And consultancy is very similar in a way to mentoring, but usually with something very specific in terms of the area of expertise. So you may get consultants come and talk to you about, I don't know, your early years provision, for example. They are going to help support and guide you with this specific area of expertise that they can help you with. The distinction between those two services down that end and coaching in the middle is that coaching is distinctly not an advice-giving service. And in fact, it's one of the hardest skills. It sounds easy. It's one of the hardest skills as a coach, particularly when you know the industry, particularly when you know what they're talking about, to not jump in and solution for them. During our training, we talk a lot about the advice monster, which is a wonderful video. And if you haven't seen it, please watch it. It changed my life. I watch it very regularly. Taming your advice monster. Coaching is the hardest part is pulling yourself back from jumping in to either control the situation, tell it, as in tell your experience to them, or to rescue it. We are often in those three modes. So particularly as teachers, you probably recognize the monster of rescue it quite a lot. Don't let anybody fail. Don't let anybody trip, fall, fluster, struggle, because if they struggle, you fail and they fail. As a coach, your role is to step back. Your role is to listen intently, really listen. And we can talk about active listening if you want to chat with me about it. I say to people when I send them off on their kind of coaching, their first coaching sessions, you should feel exhausted by this. This is not a passive activity. When I finish my coaching sessions, it's, you know, I've been listening to everything. I've been listening to every word they've said. I'm noticing when they repeat words. I notice when their body language changes. I notice when they talk about their values, what motivates them. I repeat it back to them. At the same time, I'm thinking about what is the next question I can be asking that is the best next question to guide their thinking or to challenge their thinking further. It takes a lot of practice, and it's a sort of cross between an art and a science, as teaching is, but it's definitely not an advice-giving service. And so in theory, if you are a good coach, you should be able to coach in any industry. And I've done that. It's scary. My whole life has been in education. And when I started doing coaching, I really wanted to kind of push myself to do something just totally different. So I started coaching lawyers. Anything about being a lawyer? Of course I don't. I found this little niche of coaching people who are senior associates moving to partner. Means I know nothing about that. Absolutely nothing. I don't need to. They are not coming to me to say, Julie, tell me about the law on mergers and acquisition. No, I'm not your girl. Okay, I don't know about that. I ask them the questions. What does it mean to be a partner in a law firm? I don't know. Okay, let me explain it to you. Talk to me about the challenges you face. The things are human challenges. I don't know how to delegate. I don't know how to manage upwards. I don't know how to manage my time. I'm trying to lead my team. These all sound familiar. Okay, so all of those things work across sector. The real tricky part is when you get somebody that says, oh, I'm just a new head of department. I'm really trying hard to work with my team members, and I'm finding it really hard to implement new schemes of work or whatever. Already my attention is taken away. Already I'm saying, I've been there. I can tell you what to do. Let me give you a solution. That's when you have to pull yourself back. That's when it's hard. So those things are difficult, but learned with practice. John Whitmore says that coaching, John Whitmore is the godfather of coaching. Don't know what that means. I think it means he's old, important, and written a lot about stuff. So he's the godfather of coaching, and he defines coaching as unlocking people's potential to maximize their performance. I love it. Unlocking their potential. Imagine being able to be that person through your questioning and through your listening, being able to unlock somebody's potential and show them what it is so that they can maximize their performance. That's the same graphic, but just showing what coaching is. So just moving to the method that we have used. And listen, this is a method you can use without it. Absolutely, you don't need to. I'll tell you what has worked in our schools. I can't tell you how pleased I am that it fits into the acronym HELP. We're really trying to make sure that happened. I tell you what, I knew I wanted these three, and then I got to the thinking I can't just have it as ELP. I have to have something at the beginning. And then I realized there's this first step, and the first step is readiness. I mentioned that at the beginning, the hook. So the first stage to embedding a coaching culture, and I would probably say any initiative that you're going through, actually, it doesn't have to just be for coaching, is readiness. Are people in your organization ready for this? Are they excited about it? Are you hearing things like they're saying, I really want to learn more about feedback. We need to improve our appraisal system. Oh, just another lesson observation. That was a whole waste of time. Maybe they're bringing articles about effective question, active listening. Maybe they're talking about coaching, actually, specifically that terminology. If they are, they're in a place where they might be ready. If they're not, that doesn't mean that they aren't ready. It might just mean that they need to have more information and more exposure. But there may also be cases where you just are not ready yet, and that's okay. And it's the same with any initiative. You have to judge the climate, as Rob was saying, the climate that you set in terms of your culture. The next stage is experience. We believe to be a good coach, you need to experience coaching, and experience coaching from an experienced coach. Because what used to happen was that schools used to say to me, can you come in and do a coach training day? Sure, I'll do that. I'll train you guys up. And then you're all novices, coaching novices. I don't know whether I'm getting this right. I don't know whether this is a good question. I don't know if I'm listening right. We're all just figuring it out together. If you experience coaching, first of all, it's a wonderful opportunity for your own personal growth and professional development. When was the last time you spent 20 minutes talking just about yourself and your own professional journey without consequence? I'm not talking about with your line manager. I'm just talking about with somebody who doesn't have a vested interest, your partner, your children, your parents, your whatever, your line manager, someone who has no input. Doesn't matter to them at all whether you say, you know what, I don't really want to be a teacher anymore. And if it was your partner, they go, well, hang on a minute, how are we going to pay the bills? Well, wait, don't jump to that conclusion straight away. Just without consequence. So it's a wonderful kind of moment. The second part is that you get good coaching role model for you, so you know what it feels like, looks like, sounds like. And the last part, and the most important part, we'll come to this in a minute, is developing empathy for your coachee. To create a space where somebody in a professional setting is able to come to you and have an open, honest, vulnerable conversation is difficult to achieve. You need to feel what that's like. How can I be vulnerable with somebody? How can I open up to them in this way and have productive conversations? So developing empathy for your coaching means that when you're on the other side and you're the coach, you know what it feels like when someone's asking you that probing question. You know how gently you might have to tread or how much you can challenge. It's really important. I want to go to, oh, sorry. Do you know what I was going to do? I was going to say, hook, one of the things that you can do is to determine readiness is there's lots of kind of questionnaires that you can kind of send out. You might want to create your own around measuring and assessing thoughts and attitudes in relation to job satisfaction and engagement and performance, etc. So that's one way you can kind of assess readiness. We're going to do a quick exercise. I promise you it won't take more than a minute and a half each way. You're going to turn to somebody. It can be somebody you know, or if you might not know anybody in the room, so then in which case it will be a stranger. And there's going to be a questioner, and then there's going to be a responder. And for a minute, the question asker is going to ask the question, who are you? And then you are going to respond as the responder. I will just say this with a word of warning. I've done this in many coaching sessions and coach training. We usually do it for 3 minutes. Sometimes it has ended in tears. So I just guard yourself. There are tissues here. So the questioner is going to ask, who are you? You're going to keep going until I say time, and it's only a minute and a half. And then you'll swap roles. If they run out of things to say, you can only ask that question, who are you? That's it. That's all you need. Okay, I'm going to mildly keep to time. My phone is over there. So a minute and a half, please find somebody to talk to, and off you go. I'll put it on the chat. Jen?
So I started
Hi Zoom people, I know it's hard for you to take part in this, but maybe you could just do sort of self-exploration for a minute. 5 seconds. As for humouring me with that, it's woken us up at the very least, hasn't Okay, thank you. I couldn't be part of every conversation that you were or every interaction that was happening. I heard little bits, but like, I'm not sure I could do this for 3 minutes. I heard that one. It's quite hard, isn't it? Over here. Thank you for doing that. And I know you may well have been with somebody that you didn't know, so that may be it may be easier, it may be hard, I don't know. I've done that enough times to know that it typically goes like this. You say your name, you say your job role, except that you don't, I'll come back to it. You say your job role, then you might say something about where you're from, maybe, or I've done this in international settings, so that's a particular thing, you know, I'm from the UK or whatever, but I live in wherever. So there might be a location one. And then there's a lot of relational stuff. I'm a mother, brother, sister, father, etc., etc., etc. Up until that point, it's absolutely part of your identity, particularly for teachers. I am a teacher. This is my identity. This is for some people, my only identity. And then you move past it, and it's all of those make up your identity. The fact that you are a parent, or that you're a daughter, or you're from Leeds, or whatever, they're of course all part of your identity. But it takes a while to get to these things that I like, dislike, these what motivates me, these are my values, these are my characteristics, these are my strengths. To mention about strengths, I love that. Engaging with strengths is a really important thing. Interestingly, when you do this with children, they get to that pretty quickly. That's not because they're wonderfully reflective, it's because they have less mark points. They're not like, oh, I'm 1 of 5 and I love poetry. No, they're like, you know, I like football, you know, I'm quite smart kind of thing. But they're not thinking about who they are in relation to other people. We get to that point later on when we have more markers in our lives. None of those things are particularly bad, but the point of doing that exercise is, one, that was 1.5 minutes to talk about yourself. How much of that was a story that you would trot out all the time? This is who I am. Like the first minute, probably, the last 30 seconds, we might get into something a little bit deeper about who you are and what your actual qualities are and who makes you, not who you are in relation to somebody else. You can pick parts of those out. The fact that I'm a parent means that maybe I've developed this sense of belonging and community, and relationships are important to me. But I didn't say that. I said I'm a mother, which in theory makes an assumption from the other person. They know exactly what I mean by that. And they may not. So it's an important exercise, and it's an exercise to highlight if you were to engage in a coaching relationship with somebody, or with somebody within your school. It's about getting under the skin there, understanding who they are. As Rob was saying, if you understand what motivates people and what their values are, you can align stuff that they're doing with you as part of the organization. It can be very an individualized approach. There's a level of engagement that they feel that you have with them. You're invested in them. Thank you for pushing yourself into that level of discomfort. And now my clicker doesn't work again. Okay, so that was a sort of an example of learn. I know this is very small, but I will be sharing this. In terms of the benefits of that, it's not just, I always say the first time you do coaching, or you do an experience of coaching, or you're coaching somebody else, the aims for me really are raising levels of self-awareness. First of all, who am I? What do I like? What do I want? What do I want to achieve? Why do I think in this way? Why is that important to me? Might be the first time you've reflected on that for a really long time. Raising levels of self-confidence. I know what I'm good at. I can articulate it. I can tell you why I'm good at those things. I can tell you why that poses some challenges for people or the teams I work with or for myself. And it also raises level of self-leadership. So when we're coaching people, particularly young trainee teachers, but or maybe new into post, we want to get to a place, I believe, that the complaint I get a lot from kind of school leaders is, wish people could be a little bit more autonomous. I'm answering all of these questions and I'm solutioning for them the whole time. To get them in a place where they're able to do that, they need to feel like they've got self-awareness, self-confidence, and self-leadership. They need to feel those things. And don't be surprised if they're not particularly independent learners, and we're thinking about our children here, but also our staff, if really, for the most part, 80% of the time, you've been telling them what to do the whole time. Don't be surprised if they go, I don't know what to do, because I haven't practiced it. Those 10,000 hours theory, you know, you can buy the guitar and leave it there. That doesn't make you a guitarist. You're going to actually have to play, practice, and get good at it. The same with being able to delegate responsibility, to be able to raise levels of self-confidence and self-awareness. You actually have to practice it a lot to be able to get into that deeper level of learning and increased engagement in self, and being able to build self-awareness. The last part is practice, and I just mentioned there, it's so important. The practice part is the bit that often falls off the end. You know, it's wonderful, this is great, I think coaching is brilliant, we've had the training, then it's just actually doing it. And which is why, as I said at the very beginning, the impact should be in every conversation you have. Once you start getting into the mindset of that, instead of having to solve everybody's problems or control the situation, instead changing it into really listening what's going on and asking the right question, it becomes part of everything that you do all the time. Just caveat, spouses don't enjoy being coached. So don't do your first bit of practice with your partner, family, whatever it might be. My husband is always very frustrated. Are you trying to coach me? Do you think I'm trying to coach you? This is sort of the road we go down a lot. He actually coached me the other day and it was amazing. And he was like, I just left you to that with that question hanging, and I'm really pleased with the way that you self-coached. I was so grumpy. I was like, but I'm really annoyed. And he's like, yes, I know, I hear that. It can be very frustrating language with your spouse. So maybe practice with a friend, practice with a colleague, and then eventually you can just be part of your everyday. Rob mentioned about strengths. We are a strengths-based organisation. I trained with that in mind. And the other week, and this is a total name drop, I'm so sorry, I'm just going to do it. Who cares? Because I've been referencing this person for years, and it's Sir Clive Woodward. When he took over the England rugby team, he said they were failing, just losing everything. So when we used to win, we go out and celebrate, and when we lost, we go back and commiserate. This time, when we win, we go back to the changing room and we study our wins. We figure out what we did well so we can replicate it again and again and again. And my name drop is that 2 weeks ago, I shared a stage with him, and I was able to say this story, and I don't even know if it's true. I don't even know if I'm quoting him correctly. He took it. He was like, sure, sounds good. Makes me look good. So I want you to consider, I'm not going to get you to do this exercise now, but consider, what are your top strengths? Your top three? What are you really good at? What are you really good at? And with every strength, there's a light and a shade, right? So I know my top three because I explored it and I've thought about it, and I feel really comfortable talking about those things. So my top strength is that I'm an achiever. I have a very strong work ethic. I'm a go-getter. I'm hungry. The flip side of that is that I can burn the candle at both ends. I find it hard to say no. I can overcommit. I'm very open with my team about that. And what that builds is vulnerability, but it also builds accountability. So other people who work with me know this about me. So when I say, oh, I'll get that to you tomorrow, they'll go, hang on a minute, Julie. Self-imposed deadline that's going to make you work until midnight. Overcommitting. Is that deadline realistic? that's the accountability I'm building in. Actually, no, it's not. I just said it, I'll do it, I'll work my socks off to get it to you in time, but I've overcommitted, I've burnt the candle at both ends. Knowing yourself is so important in terms of being a leader, and people in your organization knowing themselves and being able to articulate themselves without fear, without saying, you know, let's take somebody else. This is not my strength. Someone who's deeply analytical, they're comfortable with numbers, they're really good, but sometimes they can feel like they're being rude or abrupt to other people. That's because they've got to the solution already. They can't sit around waiting for people to figure out all those scenarios. They got there. They're so frustrated. They're sitting there going, I've already done the modeling. I know the thing that we need to do. I don't have time to wait. We're just going to do it my way. So knowing your sort of light and shade, the balconies and the basements of your strengths are really important, because you can articulate it. That analytical person might say, I know that sometimes I can come across being short and abrupt. It's just because that one of my real strengths is that I'm very analytical, which means that I've kind of jumped to the conclusion before, and I'm just going to take a moment and step back. Just tell me when I've got that to that point, and I will take 5 minutes to listen to what you have to say. I've already decided what you're going to do anyway, but I'll take 5 minutes to listen to what you've got to say so that I'm not quite so rude and abrupt about it. Think about, what are your top strengths? If you don't know what they are, try and explore that. Maybe ask other people. It also relies on you having a good level of self-awareness, because my goodness, aren't there lots of people who are like so deeply empathetic and everyone else is like, you wow. That's what you think. We don't think that. I did this little video on Instagram, and I spent hours last night trying to change it into a presentation format. I get this response a lot when I first started doing coaching in education, which is that it works in other professions, it won't work in education. And we disagree, because this year's the first year that we've really put this out there as a distinct offering of it is exponential, as in terms of what Rob was saying, and I know that there are other presenters that will support this. This is not just about work performance, it's about well-being. It's about who you are. It's about you as the educator. It's about the next generation of educators. This is important to recruitment, retention, professionalism, all of those things. The conversation you have with yourself and the conversation you have with others about who you are and what you want is really important. And that's just a reminder. If you want to put in your phone for a month's time, discuss with your staff. Is this something we're ready for? If remember, I said about that hook stage. Are we ready for coaching? And that's it. Thanks.